Hey guys, I am about to do some castings of my sculptures. This is the part that I've always struggled with. So in case you might be wondering, I am not a professional at mold making and doing castings. So I do a lot of trial and error, but the things that I do know, I don't mind sharing. But keep in mind that this is a new process for me. I am learning how to do mold making and casting. I've really never done it as a sculptor because I mostly relied on doing terracotta sculptures and then firing them because it's the most direct way of sculpting. So I wanted to do like replicas, and I started to look into the best ways of mold making, and I'm still learning. So I started out with like latex mold making, which is very inexpensive and very simple to do. And then I'm now doing polyurethane, and eventually hopefully I'll start doing some silicone mold making because it's a little bit more expensive. And I wanted to kind of progress in mold making as far as my skill level. I'm still like very, very low in the ranking for mold making, so bear that in mind when you watch these videos. But I have managed to do some castings that were pretty decent. So like the dead bird one, but today I'm going to be doing some casting of the relief. So I've never done the casting before of this, so this is going to be the first time I've ever used this mold that I just cast. And there are some issues with it, which is not exactly perfect. You have to make sure that it seats fully onto the mother mold. So the more so take your glove and just do this. You don't have to, right now it's too watery, as you can tell. There we go. If it starts to get like, what happens is that like the plaster will start to thicken, but you don't want to get it to the point that it starts like coagulating. That is like it starts to become hard again. So at this point, we're just going to take this and we're going to put it on our mold. And I might have to mix a little bit more, so I just want to make sure I reach the very ends here. Actually, that's enough, but I would like to get a little bit more. You see this? The edges here? So that's a problem of not mixing enough of the plaster. Just kind of vibrating it around a bit. You also want to make sure that this is level. So the plaster is pretty much set. I would like to have just a little bit more plaster in this, but this is fine. So we're just going to let this dry. It should take only like 20 minutes. You know, plaster sets very quickly. So this is the Hellboy mold, same thing. It is so deep and big that I don't want to like fill it completely with plaster. So I'm going to mix the plaster to be just a little bit thicker because I want to put it on the walls and just kind of slosh this around. This one is a little bit thicker, and hopefully it's going to work out. Remember, this is my first mold of the Hellboy mask. Putting it, I'm just going to like put it all in here. Actually, I have way too much already. So this is, I was not expecting this. Big mistakes, as usual. I'm just going to put this in here. But you see how the sculpture, it really doesn't reach the ends, and this is what we're going to do. And what this does is that it just starts covering that area, and that's exactly what we want. Because we have plenty, but the more you do this, the more it's going to build out those walls. And I'm not trying to lose any of the plaster, but and this gets kind of heavy, so onto Yeah, it's getting very thick. Look at this. It's just so thick at this point. And it starts to look almost dry at a certain point. So at this, I'm just going to push it off to the sides here. Okay, so just keep doing this. Okay, that's getting nice. I have some additional plaster on the bucket, and I'll just be putting it on the sides. It'll be a little bit stronger. Some plaster. That's just going to help you mount it on a wall or something if you wanted. A bit more plaster here. The plaster that I'm using, by the way, is not plaster of Paris. It is called molding plaster, which is not great for casting, but it's also the cheapest plaster mix. And this is my mold. I'm just going to start putting it. You should actually be slower on putting this in, so this is on me. And I don't know if this is going to... Okay, so that's our mix. You see like there's bubbles coming to the surface. Normally, because the way I have this on the table, it's very difficult to get the my reach in, so I can pour it a little bit slower, but generally you want to pour it nice and slow. I'm going to wait that and then wait a few minutes, and then we're going to check back on it. So let's just, I'm trying to pour it nice and slow, but it is a little bit on the difficult side to do. One thing I found is if you leave air bubbles and they reach the surface, it doesn't look very good. So this is a plaster cast of a cherub that I have. I'm just going to use the rest of the plaster that I have here, and I'm going to mix a new batch and quickly just put it in. All right, so I'm going to gently pour it in. And I did mix in some hydrocoral. So right here comes to the surface. I'm just going to make sure that it gets to the areas that I want. So this is the sculpture. At this point, what you want to do is kind of dig out the sides and work the plaster almost like a sculpture. You want to get to the edges here, and because you want the edges to be kind of strong, and get to the very top, so right about here. I let this dry a little bit, and now we're ready to pull this out. Hopefully it's going to be an easy pull out. So let's see, and okay. So that's the polyurethane from the mother mold. As you're pulling it out, just try to figure out the parts that are not coming out. So here we go. So this is a little bit, good detail though. A little tough to get out. Let's pull from, oh, look at this. Okay, it's releasing, and here we go. That is our first relief. There's some bits that are broken. I'm actually going to put it aside. And there are like little bits of plaster throughout. And the reason I'm going to, little bits of plaster here, you might think they're not important, but these are bits that belong on the sculpture. And I'm like looking around and I am seeing various things that broke. So I'm just going to put them all into our plaster here. The way you use is just regular glue, like white Elmer's glue, and that seems to be the best. If you just kind of bend it, it'll break the... And then I'll start to work my way. One thing I didn't do is put mold release. Often I find that you don't need it for this, but I think I should have done it for the the other relief. So I'm going to put the mother mold aside. We're going to flip this over, and hopefully, usually what happens with the bird sculpture is that the wings start to get clipped. Okay, and I'm going to flip the mold this way, and that is a pretty decent sculpt. We can kind of pull it out. Usually I do this to kind of break the excess of the plaster. This one's kind of heavy too. It is a fairly large amount of plaster. Just kind of pull this. There we go. And there goes the mold. And here we go. That's the cherub baby. There's like some bits of plaster here and there. And there's like the edges that I can, of course, sand down. But that's, I think, a pretty successful cast. I like it. There we go. This is a two-part mold. So is that by the time I get to the head, it starts breaking, and then I have to glue it. I've always had to glue this one. Thing about latex, you can turn it upside down. I almost made it without breaking. Almost made it. So the lower jaw always gets broken. Not a bad cast. Not a bad cast. It's actually a lot better than what I expected. I just never had any luck with this. Pulled up quite a bit, and it's never been. Comes out very easy though. Curious to see if this one will come out. Okay. Okay. Very sharp edges. Now I can almost get it out. Okay. Let's flip it this way. Be careful not to damage your mother mold. And there we go. Let's look at the polyurethane. It looks good. This though, I'm gonna have to, there we go. I don't want that part. So I'll just probably file it down, but pretty successful. I actually think that's a fairly successful mask of Hellboy.